Why are so many men struggling to be healthy, whole, emotionally regulated, passionate, driven with direction, compassion, patience, and able to actually overcome transgenerational trauma? Well, you might be surprised at the answer. The demonization of the feminine by every social construct we can think of was intentional. It is a program created to keep us locked within the prison planet, to keep us repeating trauma reenactments, generation after generation, lifetime after lifetime. A lot of men are struggling to heal because the feminine has been rejected, demonized, and abused. And unfortunately, a lot of men participated, sometimes unintentionally, in the abuse of the feminine. If we reflect back to what healing really is, we can see that healing is messy. It's chaotic. It doesn't have a specific container or system. It doesn't have a specific order that it is supposed to happen in, even though many people have tried to create a map for healing. Healing is radial. Okay? It's like a spiral. Healing is not a linear event. It is a journey in which you will circle back around to any subconscious patterns that have not been addressed. Healing moves like a spiral. The spiral is the feminine. Circles represent the womb in sacred geometry. The feminine has been called the creator of the original sin. It was Adam and God of mythology that were doing the right thing. It was the woman that God gave to Adam that did the wrong thing. And Adam and God both agreed that the issue was the woman, the feminine. This program, this perception, this philosophy had nothing to do with man versus woman. That particular belief purpose was to misconstrue our awareness of our energetic makeup. The feminine aspect of life is within each and every one of us. The feminine principles is within each and every one of us. For the first woman to be considered the originator of sin, it kind of painted a picture of a reason to not trust the feminine. And unfortunately, a lot of us heard that so many times to the point where that belief became a subconscious program that is beneath our level of awareness. So even if you're listening to me and you say, well, I don't believe that anymore. Well, only about 5% of what's in your reality is coming from the conscious mind. Most believe that 95% of what creates into what we call our reality is coming from the subconscious mind, which is the glacier. So what you see is just a little bit of what actually is. Now, men not only have this fear and suspicion towards the feminine, but let's say religion somehow missed you. Well, Hollywood, Disney, and hip-hop was weaponized to also cause us to perceive the feminine, the mothering energy, as being someone that cannot be trusted. Think about some of your favorite Disney movies. It was often the mother who was abusive towards the family, who abandoned the family, who was wicked in the family. Think about all of the laws and politics, the way it depicted the woman, where she was so much so a weaker vessel, she wasn't allowed to vote. She couldn't own land. She couldn't buy a house. She couldn't get a license. The list goes on and on. So women had to cleave to men to survive in the world that we have been programmed to believe is a man's world. These things created polarization between the masculine and feminine principle within each of us. Not only that, but in studying indigenous cultures, every single initiation into higher levels of consciousness, oneness with spirit, to become a vessel of the divine, included the feminine, which is how a rebirth is created. So for monotheistic religion, media, politics, to paint this terrible picture of the feminine, it wasn't really about hurting women. It was more so about a psychological campaign for men to not acknowledge and honor their own feminine, thus not being able to acknowledge and honor the feminine outside of them. Now, these two different streams of consciousness, the feminine and the masculine, are reflected within the right and left hemispheres of the brain. So let me go over a couple of things where you get a great idea as to what is feminine and what is masculine, and how these two things exist within every human on this planet. Masculine is outward. Feminine is inward. Many of us strive for outward proofs of success without going within, inward, to create a psychological foundation that allows success without the external validation. A materialistic way of thinking is a very masculine trait because it's outward. The masculine represents the exhale, whereas the feminine is the inhale. The masculine is the yang, and the feminine is the yin. The masculine is movement, A to B. The feminine, however, is flowing with life. So it's not focused on, I must have these specific destinations accomplished to feel as if I have forward movement. The healing journey is about the flow of life. It's not about the A to B destination. It's not about being attached to the outcome. It's not about, okay, I'll do A and I'm expecting B from it. That's a very masculine thing. The masculine is logical, whereas the feminine is based around intuition. Now, that's a separate webinar in itself. But I want to go through the rest of this list before I complete this stream of consciousness that I'm hoping helps you to step out of polarization. The masculine is left brain and the feminine is right brain, which means the masculine is rational, whereas the feminine is emotional. So as you can see, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence cannot be accomplished using logic and the left brain. It is not rational. It has to be accomplished using the feminine trait, the right hemisphere. A lot of men who were emotionally arrested in their development have no idea how to connect with the feminine within them if they know that the feminine is a trait, a characteristic that's within each and every one of us. Many of them don't know that. So if you're on a healing journey and you try to rationalize and make it logical, void of the emotional connection necessary to truly go within, you're going to struggle with intimacy. It's going to be difficult to identify your own emotions. Everything in the 3D matrix was created to make it difficult for us to connect, trust, and conduct our emotions in a way that's of service to us and humanity. The masculine is represented in strength, physical and spiritual. The feminine is gentle and tender, also physical and spiritual. So as you can see, the beliefs that a little boy should be strong, he should be physically fit, right? And a lot of us were raised and maybe even parented our own children to be strong, you know? And this is why gentle parenting is what I had chosen to parent, because my children were 14 years apart, and I got to see the impact of my consciousness, my spiritual journey on my children. This is also why men struggle to be gentle and tender without nurturing the feminine. Speaking of nurturing, the next trait of masculine is protection of those in need. However, the feminine nurtures and heals those in need. So as we can see here, the worldwide phenomenon of a woman having to be strong having to protect. It takes away from her ability to help those in need through nurturing and healing, because she has to go, the womb man has to go into masculine energy to hold that space for the masculine dominant beings on the planet, because a lot of them are not capable of nurturing and healing. Thus, protection is limited. Whenever the woman has to go into those masculine energies to navigate the world, there's going to be a distortion of energy. The masculine is warrior energy, authentic and truthful. The feminine can be warrior as well, but she's more like the wise mystic. The masculine focus more so on abundance and prosperity. That principle is about giving, projecting. This is why people who resonate as being men have lingams that have the ability to project energy, to give semen, to create babies. And the feminine aspect is abundance and prosperity through receiving. So as you can see, if the masculine has difficulty giving without being attached to the A to B, which is transactional, what happens is the feminine doesn't feel safe to receive, because it feels as if something is wanted. And this shuts down the ability for us to manifest financial security, emotional security, and intimacy. Okay? If the masculine can be symbolized as courage and resilience, the feminine counterpart would be more about surrender and grace. The masculine is all about powerful actions and growth, whereas the feminine is restoration and regeneration. Many who resonate mostly with the feminine have spent a lifetime taking action, trying to grow in this world into a successful person, lacking the time and support to be restorated and regenerated. The masculine is all about executing the plan with fierceness, whereas the feminine is birthing, assertive, confident, and graceful. Now, these are just a few things that help you to see what the differences are between the two. I've been sitting on whether or not I was going to bring this up. And I'm going to bring it up because if I don't, I'm actually not being in integrity, because this is something that has been bothering me for years. In 2014, that's when I really came in contact with this spiritual energy created by a masculine dominant being, and we can say man in this case, who has this pain towards his mother, this disconnect towards his own feminine. And when you take those things and look at them from the aspect of what I had expressed, the psychological programming that many of us have went through, you can see why the masculine struggles to love and honor women without wanting anything in return. I did a video called Why Black Men Hate Black Women. And in 2015, I was pregnant, and the biological father threatened my life. He threatened me. He didn't try to help me. As soon as I wasn't doing a being, accommodating him, assimilating to whoever he wanted me to be, I was abandoned. I was accused of intentionally trying to ruin his life. And the level of hatred, resentment, disgust that I experienced, I knew was coming from a place of deep pain and grief. And this began my self-love journey, where I became more radical about the way I show up for me. So it was such a blessing to me, but it was painful. And I talked about this in the video, and if you read the comments on this video, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. Now, let's talk about the healing journey. The healing journey cannot be accomplished without the feminine. Okay? It requires a flow. It requires a natural level of detachment from the work that you're doing to be able to appreciate the journey and be grateful for the experiences versus trying to hurry up and get to the end and get through it and get to destination B from destination A. It's radial. It's a spiral. The cosmos move radial. The wheels of the heavens. Our chakras are masculine and feminine. These are energy centers within our spiritual anatomy. And what I have noticed is that the feminine chakras, just like everything else on this planet is feminine, just like Mama Earth, there is a distortion in the movement. So what happened was the psychological programming caused men to feel puffed up about being a man, living in a man's world, and having so many rights that women did not have, being able to get paid more than the woman, even though she is doing the same work, or maybe even more or better. And this created a false sense of self. This created a false sense of confidence. This also created this superiority complex where men for a very long time felt like they were at the top of the hierarchy. And when you think about religion and a lot of the teachings in there, you also see that at one point women couldn't even ask questions at church. They had to wait till they got home to ask their man. It wasn't permitted. What type of teaching would diminish the role of the feminine to the point of basically saying, shut up. Don't be speaking in the house of God, even though it is your physical temple that gave birth to every human on this planet. You are not allowed to speak. You are not allowed to question anything that's going on. And this energy has permeated throughout the universe, throughout many other social constructs, beliefs, things that we have been conditioned to accept. And it's not healthy. The energetic outcome of this is symbolized by a man who's disconnected from his own feminine self. He doesn't know how to nurture himself. He doesn't know how to love himself. He doesn't know how to rebirth himself. He doesn't know how to receive. He doesn't know how to rest. He may struggle with his creativity. He may struggle with intuition. He may struggle with connecting with his emotions. All of these things are required for ascension. So if the energy of ascension is here, and it is, that means that it cannot be done without the feminine. In the mythology of Isis, Horus, and Osiris, and the way the feminine was the one that went and found his phallus when his body was chopped up into 13 pieces and put back together. I mean, this is astrotheology in the form of ancient Kemet mythology. However, the principles are the same. just the same as Joseph, Jesus, and Mary. We see this over and over again in many different mythologies and spiritual systems and philosophies. So women became the surrogate mothers to men who were disconnected from their own feminine sense of self. This means that what men were supposed to learn to give to themselves became the responsibility of women. And what's happening now, as women are awakening to these imbalances and seeking to be whole and to be healed, to be authentic and to be loved just as she is, as we are pulling our energy away, as we are not investing ourselves in being martyrs and taking on way more burden, than any human being will benefit from taking on. Let's say that. And as a result of that, men became emotional vampires, physical vampires. They are craving and yearning and have a hunger for the feminine and what the feminine entails. But if he doesn't know to cultivate that within himself, he's going to latch on to feminine things outside of him. And that does not only include women, but that includes marijuana, which is a plant, which is a feminine energy. That includes any activities that are considered to be feminine. Some of those external ways of connecting with the feminine are beneficial. However, if you lack awareness and you don't know that this is what you're doing, you don't know that there is a gaping hole inside of you that so needs to be loved, accepted, and fulfilled, you will turn into a codependent, trying to get that need met. You may turn into a narcissist, seeking some way to supply that which you have not identified is within you. This is not just for people, this is for systems as well. Many churches thrive because of the woman. The percentage of woman to man in church has a huge chasm in between it. And that's because women, containing the energy of regeneration, have been used as the batteries to keep these social constructs, these philosophies, these manipulated, distorted, misinterpreted belief systems going. And what you will notice, because I dreamed about this, and this was before I knew any of what I'm talking to you about now. But when you step away from something that you were just sacrificing your health, your mind, your peace, when you step away from that, if what you step away from starts to be diminished, weakened, it starts to go down, it starts to get difficult, maybe suffering starts to happen. A lot of men are going through that, just as a lot of power structures are going through that. A lot of men had no idea how much they needed the feminine. If you look at hip-hop and the way it was weaponized and turned into rap, and think about what I just said to you. Our words create spells. They create a form of hypnosis. They embed into our subconscious mind and create the filters in which we perceive life. If the woman is sacred and she carries the essence of rebirth, and music is dragging her in every which way while raping her simultaneously, glorifying it, what is the spiritual, energetic outcome that comes from that? What happens when the group of people on the planet who have these high amounts of trauma make music, and most of them are very gifted, do not get me wrong. But what happens when a powerful person uses their words to polarize and destroy another, to judge, stereotype, demonize? What happens karmically? What happens when you accept a royalty check for a song that you made, just dragging women, dragging the feminine? It's not just about women. This is about energy, frequency, and vibration. According to Tesla, everything in this world is frequency, energy, and vibration. So what we see happening to a lot of men, even if they aren't rappers, if they subconsciously receive that information and subscribe to that belief system, and they have not canceled that vow, that pact, that soul contract that was created in a broken system meant to keep you trapped, reincarnating, and not being able to truly clear karma, that creates dysfunction. And energetically, until those vows are canceled, men are going to struggle to be with anything in this world that is feminine. The twisted thing about this is a lot of men have no idea the way music was affecting their subconscious mind. And so their semen held that vibrational frequency of hatred, disgust, resentment, anger, frustration. And when that man has sex with a woman, because she is the receiver of energy, all of that pain and unprocessed trauma embeds inside of her, and it travels through her womb space. It's no wonder that so many women, especially black women, have fibroids and cervical cancer, polycystic ovarian disease, endometriosis, and the list goes on and on. It's no wonder. Because we too became victims to this system, and we were energetically absorbing what was being bypassed in the masculine. So now we're in contract with the bullshit that I don't believe any of us would consciously agree to. But you cannot fix what you do not know is broken. And so this information travels from her womb space. Once the man releases it from his body, and this is not just about semen, this is about energy as well, but I'm using semen because sometimes it's easier for us to understand things that show up in the physical realm versus the spiritual invisible. So that energy goes into the woman, climbs up her spine, 33 degrees up her spine, enters and embeds itself in her amygdala, which is the center that controls fear. And she may not know that each time she has sex, fear is being injected into her. Fear is being activated in her. And because she may not know why, that information is stored in the quantum computer we call the brain. And now she struggles to feel safe, not just in the world, but in her relationships. She struggles to feel safe in her own body, inside of her own temple. I went through this for so long, and I could not figure out what was happening to me, why I was so triggered and feeling so unsafe. And I'm sharing a moment with someone that I love. So what is happening? Why do I feel this way? Now, I want to tell you what the scared masculine shows up as versus the sacred. The scared masculine is defensive. He is easy to go in fight or flight and go into attack mode. That's the hunter energy, the fight energy, the warrior energy we discussed. A lot of men have been warring with their own feminine and the feminine outside of them. And sometimes this shows up during sex. And it's energy. It's not anything he's saying. It may not even be anything he's consciously thinking. But trauma embeds itself in the body. The body keeps score. Scared masculine energy also is represented by being lost in your head, stuck in your head, and not being able to be in touch with your emotions. This is dangerous, especially now that all of these portals have been opening and all of these different interdimensional beings are just being let loose on this planet. If you are in your head and not in your body, you do not have control over what energies are taking up space vibrationally in your body. The next thing is the sacred masculine tends to be selfish. It tends to seek to preserve itself at all costs. It can be cold and distant. It could show up as aggressive, overly aggressive, passive aggressive. The scared masculine needs to be right. The scared masculine fears failing and has a strong attachment to success externally. So men being in love with their cars to the point where they take care of it and spend more time with it than they do with themselves. You know, and again, this is not just about men. Women can have scared masculine energy as well. But I'm using these worldly examples. It just helps us to see it more clearly. Now, the sacred masculine, which is healthier than the scared masculine, has the ability to be vulnerable and transparent, honest and accountable. The sacred masculine is not going to show up defensive. The sacred masculine does not attack people when they feel threatened, especially when they're not really being threatened. It's a trauma response. The sacred masculine is in service and not really caring about what they're going to get, because masculine energy is meant to be the giver. So it's grounding. It's focused. It has discipline. It has drive and direction. It's noble, committed, and able to be present without being distracted. The scared feminine has a tendency to be manipulative, insecure, often seeking external validation, stuck in victimhood mindsets, becomes needy, clingy, and or desperate to be loved externally. The scared feminine is willing to be a martyr and sacrifice herself. This is when the feminine is just giving and giving and giving. She's supposed to be receiving, but just giving and giving and giving because maybe there isn't a healthy sacred masculine present to give to the feminine. So the feminine says, okay, well, I will be what I need to be to survive. So I'm going to give love, I'm going to be in service. And oftentimes there's nothing left for you. The scared feminine may not have boundaries. this aspect of us says it's too risky to have boundaries. I cannot risk being abandoned. Now, the sacred feminine, she's able to receive compliments. The sacred feminine is able to listen, create community, create tribes. This is why you see so many indigenous cultures where it is the woman that maintains the community and the tribe. The sacred feminine enjoys the process of healing. The sacred feminine isn't afraid to let the needs be known, to be vulnerable. The sacred feminine is intuitive and highly creative. So whenever creative gifts are being used to spread music with messages in it against the feminine, you can see how that creates karmic contracts to re-experience more pain, and your healing journey will continue to be linear, which basically means you will spend every day trying to get from point A to point B, not present for the in-between, not grateful for the journey. And that is the epiphany that I arrived to about getting stuck, where growth seems to hit a plateau and just stop happening. Now, the sacred feminine is loving. She's compassionate, receptive, confident in her body, knows that she is strong, does not have to prove it, and isn't afraid to observe and create necessary boundaries to be safe. Now, with some of these things that I've expressed to you, I want you to start observing something. And I know this might be hard for some people to hear. I've shed many tears about this. And what I'm about to say to you is something that is going to require compassion. Okay. Many masculines since 2019, when the galactic new year began, when we moved into a new age, when we left the age of Pisces and entered into the age of Aquarius, I have noticed a lot of masculines, both in my reality and in the media, Hollywood. I have noticed the way masculine dominant beings are aging. They're getting gray really quickly, getting shorter, losing muscle mass, losing the strong jawline, losing hair at early ages, has the appearance of just aging. One of the first people in which I noticed this was D.L. Hughley. And I almost thought it was a look-alike. I didn't know who he was. And I said, oh my goodness. Like, I just saw him a year ago. He looks like he's aged 5 years in a year. What's happening to the men on the planet? And this is not a personal judgment against him. None of this is personal, y'all. This is spiritual. Just observe. He was one of the first ones. And I started to pay attention to which masculines seemed to stop aging and which masculines seemed to be going through progressive aging, a rapid aging. And I asked my divine self, what is it that I can learn here? What are you showing me? And my divine self said, well, if you notice the men who nurture their own feminine essence, they're not aging anymore. And an example would be Maxwell. Another example would be Tank. And these are just two of many. I began to see an eagle eye view of the way these energies are affecting us. If you are not connected to the feminine and you're trying to get that in a way that's just not healthy for regeneration, it eventually will manifest physically. This is by design. This is social engineering. And as an intuitive who also uses remote viewing, when I look into the Akashic records, one thing that I notice is the telomeres shortening. And telomeres are the dictators of your lifespan. And I'm sure most of us here know that most men have a shorter lifespan than women. And even in marriages, women usually live longer than their male counterpart. And this was true for women in my family. I watched this happen over and over and over again. And I wanted to know why. It is my goal to be a part of the solution, and it is my goal to be painfully honest about what I'm observing. Otherwise, I'm not being in integrity with myself. So pay attention to that. Notice how many men in their late 40s to maybe late 50s, early 60s are sick, having to be in the hospital, nursing homes, bedridden, having heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure and aneurysms, ending up on dialysis. Notice that a lot of them don't have people that's helping them. Why is that? And you can ask any nurse, any doctor, and again, this is firsthand experience. Well, if hip-hop molded your subconscious mind and you took on the vibrational frequency of those messages into your subconscious mind, meaning you're unaware of it, maybe you did not love your children, your children's mothers, from that space of the feminine, the heart. Maybe it was logical. Maybe it was reasoning. You know, our values were shaped by culture, and culture is toxic. To the point where we just accepted a lot of stuff as normal. So if you spent most of your life believing those things, going to the club, spending all of your money on gold teeth and chains and rims in your car, and, you know, wanting to drink and have fun all over, every day, over and over again, not being connected to the feminine aspects of you, which means your relationships were not being nourished. They were not being cultivated. And those lifestyles, because the illusion, the veil, the curtain is being taken down, we can see physically, especially for those of us who see energy. But even if you don't, physically observe the appearance of men who live that culture, who embrace that culture as a lifestyle. And just look at where they are now. And it's unfortunate. Because we need men. We need men to do what it is they were created to do. This imbalance was created through social engineering, as we discussed, but also experimentation, medical experimentation. Heavy metals, they damage the brain development. If the brain development is damaged, then there's an inability to connect with the right hemisphere, your emotions, your creativity, your intuition. And at the same time, men were pumped up with this pride. Their egos have been cultivated by a toxic culture. So if you are on the journey of healing, I want you to remember something. Maybe you're just starting. The feminine is also dark, and the masculine is light. Spiritual bypassing basically means that I'm going to use spirituality to bypass the reality of what's really happening in my life, calling for my attention. Monotheistic religions and religions outside of that, spiritual belief systems, oftentimes bypass the true root of the problem. What happens is the natural flow is blocked off. And without being able to emotionally connect due to gender-bending chemicals. We can start with baby food, baby formula, like it's all coming out now. And I told y'all that it would. In 2017, 2018, I really began going deeper into these transmissions to explain what was occurring and about to occur. So, the masculine became a victim to the patriarchy that masqueraded as something boosting them up, inspiring them, supporting them, giving them free rein to do whatever. That's the downside of the patriarchy for the masculine. So the whole love and light thing resonated with me for a little while. I needed more love in my life, and I knew it. And I had went through so many dark times, I was just ready to see the light. What I failed to connect to my own healing journey was the presence of darkness and its purpose. If you do not know the purpose of something, you are more likely to abuse it. The purpose of darkness, feminine energy, is creation. Even in monotheistic religions and many ancient texts, it was taught that light was created by darkness, which means masculine, light, was created by darkness, feminine. Go check it out. In the beginning, God spoke. We can leave religion and look at physics, look at astronomy. Before creation, there was darkness. There was just black space. And the Big Bang occurred. And now we are all sitting here. That light that created the physical world had to be birthed through the dark, which is the feminine. Which means the feminine actually was the creator of the masculine as a necessary counterpart to co-create. So to distort that and turn that backwards was to cause us all to live in this backward system, which gave the freedom for the feminine to continue to be used as a battery, to continue to be used for whatever it is that they're being used for. If it's okay for God to do it, if it's okay for God to curse every human being on the planet because of something Eve, the woman, did, that subconscious belief is also going to create your reality where within your unawareness, below the veil of your ability to be mindful, there is this tendency to blame the feminine for everything. It's that woman you gave me. Lack of accountability. Adam lacked accountability. And I use this story because I know most people that follow me know this story. Can anybody relate to masculine dominant beings struggling to be accountable for their actions? If you can, drop a comment. I want to know who else can relate to this. Who else has observed this and noticed this? So this is a level of resentment in the form of sorcery, spell casted over us with words. Now our relationships reflect that. And because we are no longer in tribal communities as a collective, the way we used to be, we have tried to exist in relationships and marriages, giving the responsibility of our partner to meet all of our needs that would usually be met by a whole village, by a whole tribe. Credo mutua, malodoma sama. Baba Barashenko, the black woman, is their original guardian angel. These are just 3 off the top of my head. They express the significance of the feminine. They express the power of the woman. So, looking at that, you see, in order to break the man down, the social constructs, the toxic culture, the systems, beliefs, and values that we inherited as a form of clone consciousness that wasn't of our own making, that condition automatically polarized us. And to live polarized is to exist in black or white. It's either black or white. There is no in between. It's either good or bad. Monotheistic religions taught this. So there's no in between. If the woman is the originator of all sin, it's really easy for men to just, be frustrated and resentful towards the feminine, because it's just like, oh my goodness, I'm going through the same shit Adam went through. The patriarchy is basically narcissism created for the masculine to feel as if he's at the top of the hierarchy. I believe that we have equal power. When you look at masculine and feminine, both have power. However, if the emotional aspect has not been cultivated, how do you relate to the feminine? To the external expressions of the feminine? What did this do to women mentally and emotionally? How were we affected by watching Snoop Dogg walk women down the red carpet like dogs with a collar around their neck? How did that affect us? I was a young girl when I saw that, and I know that affected me. And I said to myself, oh my goodness, the man has dominance. He has power. I must submit and surrender to whatever he wants if I'm going to survive, because it's a man's world. How did that affect us? So it's no surprise that a great example. It's no surprise that Aaliyah had all of these men around her at a young age, objectifying her, using her, not respecting her boundaries. It's not requiring a rocket scientist to see how twisted it really was. How twisted it was for Foxy Brown to have been, 14 or 15 years old? And whoever was writing her music, it didn't sound like a 14, 15-year-old, that's for sure. And I remember being that age and listening to her album. That affected me. My subconscious was being programmed, because music is frequency, energy, and vibration. And if my brain, my body is over 70% water, and water reflects emotions, How did that affect me emotionally? What was that teaching me? What was that telling me men wanted me to be? We have those experiences, but when they show up when you become an adult, maybe you're sexually promiscuous. And then men judge you. And like, I can't turn no hoe into no housewife. You a hoe. You a hoe. They was nodding and bobbing their head to the same music we was. So there's a subconscious program inside of them as well. This polarization got us out here looking at each other like we each other's enemy. And in a way, we kind of are. Our consciousness was hijacked to see each other as the problem. The exact same thing that happened on plantations. The exact same thing that happened with colonization, where we were seeing each other as a problem. If a man could not protect his family and he was being whipped, how did that affect the women observing their husbands, their children, fathers, their partners, their protectors to go through this? Psychological warfare and generational curses cannot be separated. They're one and the same. Creating a generational curse requires some form of psychological warfare. And those are just a couple of instances. I have about 5,000 notes on this topic alone. And each time I think that I have exhausted the roots to why we're having the experience we're having, more stuff is unveiled for me. It's pretty easy to see why a lot of women are dealing with womb trauma, noticing that they need healing. And this doesn't have to be overt sexual abuse that caused this, because the culture was so toxic. Growing up, boys, young men, they felt like they had the right to grab our asses, to touch our titties, to chase us down and hump us. What was it called? Catch a girl, get a girl, and you get humped on? Where was that coming from? Why were we doing that as children? What program was going on in the subconscious self that we were even participating in something like that? I'll never forget not being respected, my boundaries not being respected, being touched on, being fondled, catcalling, psst, psst, that thing, psst, hey, psst, come here with your fine ass. I'm probably 10. I'll never forget the way I felt. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe around the masculine. What gave them that amount of right? Why did they feel like that was okay to objectify us? Could social engineering have been a technique used to accomplish that outcome? I started carrying razor blades under my tongue just to go to school, just to walk to the corner store, just to go get a freezy from the candy lady. That's how unsafe I felt, that I would take a chance and cut my mouth open just to feel a sense of security. That razor blade in my mouth, that box cutter in my purse, it gave me a sense of safety. And then once I couldn't do no more, we started we started using those combs to do our finger waves with rat tail combs, and so that was my weapon. I would keep it stuck in my hair everywhere I went, and people were like, why you still got that in your hair? I didn't feel safe. And each time I wasn't even thinking about it, that it happened, it just reinforced how unsafe as a feminine dominant being I had become. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't feel safe around cousins. I didn't feel safe around uncles. I mean, the list goes on. And don't even get me started with what was happening at church. I had at least 150 men and young men tell me that I was their wife. Would even grab me and tell me, God told me you my wife. I wasn't being asked. I'm from Memphis, y'all. I did say asked. Don't be shocked. This is about authenticity right now. I felt like it was a command, and I was supposed to accept it. I was supposed to accommodate it. And the man in the church was just as bad as the man in the streets. The man in the streets was just as bad as the men at school, the boys at school. So this is something that we experience over and over again. So if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and upwards, and you're noticing these discrepancies in your energetic field, in your womb space, it may not be just one event. It may be a whole bunch of events. Stuff that you probably don't even remember in your conscious mind, but your body kept the score. And because men were taught to believe that sexual release is something that must be done by the woman, they became entitled. So I don't have to have emotional intelligence with you. I don't have to truly heal and work on myself to be with you, because I respect and honor you. So husbands, men who came through religion, men who grew up listening to hip-hop and now R&B, have a subconscious sense of entitlement to a woman's body. And we can also see this in relation to Earth and her resources. There are always parallels in physical reality and spirituality. The spirit realm. I don't want to make this longer than it is, because I went way longer than I expected. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and I definitely want to make sure that I self-care and get my proper rest. Feminine, right? Or feminine energy. Activity to get rest. But before I get off, I want to leave you with some of the stages of emotional healing. And again, I know men went through abuse too. I know that they went through traumas as well. I'm not called to facilitate healing for men. I'm called to facilitate healing for women. Due to societal pressure and the toxic culture, I haven't really invested as much of myself into this publicly as I would like to. I canceled those contracts. I canceled those vows. I canceled those pacts. And I am committed to empowering women. Hopefully, if men are listening to this, hopefully this becomes a catalyst for your healing journey. So here are some of the stages of emotional healing. The first stage is usually some form of acknowledging suffering, acknowledging trauma, discovering the things that you went through. And you may even notice how you dismiss your own emotions, your painful emotions. You bypass your painful emotions. You don't want to deal with it. You don't want to feel it. You feel the suffering. You feel the outcome. But dealing with it seems difficult. Maybe it's hard to confront yourself, confront your fears, confront the repressed shadow aspects of you that you don't feel like are worthy of being seen. So that's usually the first stage. where you notice the trauma, you notice the suffering, you notice the things in your life that just simply are not a reflection of someone who is whole. The next stage is usually a deeper level of awareness. You can begin to name some of these things. You identify with the fact that I do carry a shame imprint. I do carry a guilt imprint. I do have betrayal wounds, abandonment wounds. And you begin to figure out how it shows up in your day-to-day life, in your emotions, the way you feel, your mood, and you begin to connect the dots. And in that awareness phase, I talk about acceptance, acknowledging it, which is the next phase. And this is when you start to confront these things. You're not running from it. You're not avoiding it anymore. You're facing it. You're accepting it. Radical acceptance. This is when you're able to say, you know what? I see how my childhood conditioning affected me emotionally. And one of those ways was a persistent hunger for external validation and love from someone else. I need somebody else to pump me up. I need somebody else to make me feel confident. I need somebody else to make me feel beautiful. I need somebody else to make me feel successful. I need somebody else to make me feel like I have power. And so instead of avoiding those things, you start to confront it. And this is the stage where you usually will attract the information that you need in different teachers, or you go looking for it.